welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. We bring you the right information to empower you, the MSME entrepreneur. Tonight on the show, to the influencers. First up, Captain Zack in focus, and we'll also feature Webscale tonight. The off-the-shelf pet products market here in India is very small, and most of the products you have available are largely imported. But you do have a few companies that are innovating in India for the Indian market. One such company, Captain Zack, in fact, is one of the largest when it comes to the pet healthy and health lifestyle market. I caught up with Captain Zack to understand regulation, to talk about how the market is changing and what the growth is looking like. Take a listen. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Not very often that we get the chance to speak with an entrepreneur who's in the pet care space here in India. So it's very exciting to have you on the show with us tonight. I want to talk about the fact that you've entered this market, given that your family and you have interests as far as the chemicals business is concerned. So there was really no connection, if I can call it that, between these two spaces, but you decided there was a market in the pet care industry. So maybe just run us through Captain Zack.
Sonal, thank you so much. Captain Zack basically is the whole idea started behind the fact that I have a dog called Zack, and I've had him for 9 years. I've had a dog for literally 40 years of my life. I have cats as well. And I just felt that my knowledge in the chemical industry has brought me to where this business is right now. I don't think we at India are doing justice to what we make in India for the pet care industry in the pet grooming space. There's no government regulation that tells you what not to do, what to do. Honestly speaking, I don't want to say this, but this is what it is in India. Imported products are being imported from UK, USA, and they're much better than the Indian products, and that I hate saying that. So I just thought of it with my experience and knowledge being in the chemical business for human care for the last 28 years, skin and hair. I thought that because I know animals, I know formulations, I know what I would do if I had to put into regulation into place. I thought I could make a very good, very safe product for pets. I wanted to first look at the dog industry first and then get into other animals. I have my eyes on all animals, cats and horses, probably even cow.
Okay, so you're saying the industry in India is really small. 4 million is nothing to write home about. But that said, this is clearly a business which is set to grow. We have a lot of international players that are looking at the domestic market. Is there money to be made in this business? Are you making money, for instance?
So mine is we are a startup. We will take time to break even. But for sure, we're going to make money in this business. The reason we're going to make money in this business is because it's still very nascent. There's a long way to go. Like I said, there's the pet industry is 4 million. It translates to 3 dogs per 1,000 humans. In USA, it's 214 dogs per 1,000 humans. So even if we grow this business 10 times, right, and you say 30 dogs per 1,000 humans, the size of the business today is 1.2 billion pet industry, and US is 60 billion. Even if we grow it 10 times, we get into 12 billion space. So, you know, there's a lot of money to make. And for us, I believe I am the early mover or the starter in the start. And with my knowledge of chemicals that I've known for 25, 30 years, 3 decades, I am giving the pets really what they deserve in terms of safety and right use.
Okay. For someone who's watching this interview and saying that the pet care space is definitely something that they want to enter, as someone who's had that early mover advantage, if you could look at the future in the next, say, 2-3 years and say these perhaps are the segments in the pet care industry, whether it's pet care like shampoos, etc., whether it's pet food, if you could say these are the segments that I think are going to grow, going by what I've seen, what would that be?
So basically, the segments comprise of treats, food, toys, grooming, right? You really can't beat the big guys of the Mars and of the world for foods. It's very tough to play with them. And then if you're talking of treats, then again, Southeast Asia is far ahead of us. If you're talking of grooming, which is the space that I've chosen, it's not just because of my experiences in chemicals. I also believe that there's a lot of room to grow here, because in India, people don't give their dog a bath. Sometimes they believe that once in 2 months, at best once a month. Actually, you should give your dog a bath every week. And if that itself becomes like the guys who are doing once in 2 months, if they do it once a week, you've straight away got 8 times the sale. So there is a lot of scope, whereas food you can't feed more. You can't feed more than your twice a day, thrice a day, that's not going to change. So that market, if some new player comes into that industry, it's going to be shared. In pet grooming, it's only here to grow.
Okay. You were talking about mass, etc. And we started this conversation with you talking about government regulation. So I just want to come back to that. Government regulation in the pet care industry, what would you have to say about that? Is it, do you have a regulation that covers pet food in India? Do you have regulation that covers, pet care in India? And if not, then what perhaps would you like to see? What steps do you want to see being put in place?
So there are regulations that are covering pet food, for sure. There are no regulations covering pet grooming. So for the hair and skin, for the coat, there's nothing. I would love to see this happening in India, only because it's going to benefit India, because Indian companies today are not really enforcing the right mechanism or the right ways of making their formulas. They're using salt, they're using all sorts of things that shouldn't be used in formulation. And I think if there's a regulation that comes in, people will be more conscious, and the products for the dog will be better, and it will be better for the Indian industry as well. Currently what's happening is that if you ask me who my competitor is from UK, from USA. We compete against those brands because those brands are far more conscious, and their products are really good. Okay.
But these products also obviously come at a price, which means that products like yourself are necessarily talking to a small base in the metros, SECA, educated, urban, young, etc. If you are looking at a pan-India base, if you're looking at tier 3, tier 4 markets as well, then what perhaps is going to help that growth? What do you think is needed to ensure that these products become more broad-based?
So yeah, we do have a slight issue, because we're using we're using harmless chemicals, we're not using fragrances, we're not using parabens, so we have to supplement them with little more expensive ingredients. But what we've done is we've not spent exorbitant amount of money on the look and feel and packaging. Although it looks funny and it's a playful looking brand, I've kept those costs low, so I don't incorporate high costs like a skincare haircare. You put more money into packaging. It is affordable when it comes down to a simple mats that you give your dog a bath twice a month. We've done the mats. It's very simple that for pure shampoo for a dog over a whole year, you should not, even if you use our shampoo, you don't cross a figure of 4,000 rupees for the whole year. And that I'm talking of twice a month. So if somebody if all pet owners, pets are like your babies. You don't look at the cost of what you spend for a pet. So a 4,000 rupee cost for a whole year with our shampoo at a higher per unit cost compared to others is very affordable for a pet owner.
Okay. I want to talk innovation in the pet care industry in India. There are very few players like a Himalaya, for instance, like you, for instance, who are doing something specific for the Indian market. Otherwise, it's always international brands that are imported into the country. Why is that?
It's probably because I think in India, we're a copycat country. So we keep looking and seeing what we can do in terms of copying the others. So innovation happens. Himalaya, of course, is huge, right? And they've got scientists working in their labs. So they would spend money on innovations. The other pet care brands in India really are literally confined to very small, their accessibility is not too much. What we do is I've tied up with the scientists in California, I've tied up with scientists in London. I'm absorbing those costs and not incorporating those costs into the brand. In order to bring in some innovation, like I'm coming out with a very new product which is going to be anti-itch. And it's basically made out of products that you don't get in India, but I'll have to indigenize that formulation and I'll tweak it here. So I think it's people need to put in that money and time and effort to invest in innovation today and reap the benefits tomorrow. Okay. If you count if everything is making money on that day, you're not going to happen.
Okay. So speaking of money, do investors show any interest in this business? Have you raised funding? And if you have, what has that experience been like? Are investors open to the idea of investing in the pet care market in India?
So in my company, we house 2 brands, skincare, haircare, and of course pet care. And I've been funded in October last year.
For the pet care business?
For the pet care.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the pet care by itself. And it's a very well-known, credible investor who's put in the money. His name is Japan Vyas, in fact. And he's basically invested in the pet care industry. We are looking at another round of funding now. There are a lot of people knocking on my door for the pet care industry. So there is a lot of interest. And primarily mainly on the fact that pets it's a growing industry. It's untapped. It's kind of unorganized, which also is a benefit to us.
Okay, but is the pool of investors that you can tap into much smaller than if you were in any other industry, for example?
No, the pool of investors could be the other investors as big as the ones putting into any consumer goods business.
Okay, great. My last question to you then. You were talking about, looking at another round of funding, for instance, but I want to understand what else is on the radar, anything that you're excited about that you can share with our viewers.
So what is on the radar is also funding, of course, is very interesting, because with funding comes in bigger business and more opportunities to build Captain Zack brand. But I also have a small foundation of my own that I do a lot of charity work for animals. It's called We Love Animal Foundation. And I feel that, I mean, all the money that I make, a lot of money that I make from Captain Zack is going to be put to use for the welfare of animals. So that's for me exciting right now. And of course, I do want to expand beyond dogs. And I just feel that there's a lot of opportunity that we have with horses and cats and cows.
Okay, Mohit,
so animal industry is where I am for.
All right, and wish you all the very best for that. Thank you so much for speaking with us today on Leaders of Tomorrow.
Thank you, Sunanda.
Thank you. Time for a break. Webscale is our second conversation in focus tonight. What is the company doing? We'll tell you more. That's on the other side. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight on The Influencers, Webscale is in focus. Led by Indian talent and based in the US is a cloud computing based e-commerce company Webscale. I spoke with the company to understand exactly how they're viewing the Indian market when it comes to cloud computing, security and data protection concerns, as well as what their own growth plans are. Take a listen. Sonal, always a pleasure having you here on the show. Let me start by talking about Webscale. You are a company which is led by Indian talent, but you've chosen to be headquartered outside of India. Just run us through, the formation of the company and what you'd want our viewers to know about Webscale.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come talk to you about Webscale. So Webscale is the e-commerce cloud company, and that's our tagline, and kind of defines what we do. We work with e-commerce businesses around the world, right from smaller companies that are doing a few $1 million in revenue all the way to companies that do billions of dollars in revenue online.
You're a company that's chosen to focus on the e-commerce market, of course. So I want your opinion at this point on perhaps, your views on how you're seeing the e-commerce market changing and expanding. Where do you see it headed from here?
It's a really interesting market, and we've invested some time and effort in this market. We've got a handful of customers in the India market, as you know, both on the security side as well as cloud infrastructure management side. And we find it to be a really interesting market because I would say a lot of the newer companies are already leveraging cloud infrastructure. So I think some of the cloud providers have done a great job in marketing the benefits of using the cloud into the India market very effectively. And then there's some traditional brick and mortar mid-market companies that are starting to move to e-commerce or starting to create a pretty large sort of digital transformation within the organizations. The churn in this market is fairly high. I think part of it might have been the demonetization, part of it is changes in the financing of some of these companies, but it's a sort of, some of the large companies that have created a massive footprint in the market have been really successful. So like, a couple of our customers, there's Carrot Lane, Nali's, Gitanjali Jewels and their storefronts, actually in the US as well, Samuel's and Rogers and other stores. So we find that if they run the digital transformation, they tend to be extremely successful.
Sonal, globally, I understand you look at e-commerce, e-learning as well as financial services, and you were just very briefly talking about that as well. My question to you is, in India, besides e-commerce, of course, what else you're perhaps looking at?
So anyone who is running a transaction on the internet, it could be a media house, it could be, the transaction that's being run is actually content. And we do have a handful of customers that are, their product, if you want to call it that, is actually content. So our sort of focus on e-commerce is anyone doing any kind of transaction on the internet is a good Webscale customer. We've got, we've had success in the financial markets. We've got a, handful of bullion customers. They're actually selling gold and silver, just, bullion level gold and silver on the internet. We've got e-learning companies that are delivering classroom and certification to, call it nurses or real estate investors or everything in between. And then we got your traditional consumer retail. You've got people that are right from brand to fashion to clothing, to other products, to medicines, to supplements. I mean, the breadth is massive.
The minute one says the word cloud and cloud computing, of course, the one thing that comes to mind is security of data. So let's talk about data security. Let's talk about data leaks. That's been the talking point over the past couple of months. Your views on that and how perhaps that can also be strengthened here in India.
So one of our biggest focuses, and this is an interesting transformation that we've seen, is when we started working with e-commerce companies back in 2015, which was the time that we brought our first customer online. Our focus was predominantly uptime and performance, and some focus on security. And it was your traditional security thinking of blacklisting, whitelisting, protecting the site from, call it, bad actors. And over time, we've realized that the security portion as well as automation has become the biggest focus for our customers as we get into bigger customers and as the market starts to change. And I think a big part of it is, like you mentioned, it's data leaks. It's people trying to run hundreds of thousands of credit cards across the system. It's people siphoning out data from the back end. So Webscale is very unique in that focus because we sell to e-commerce companies, but we don't just sell security for e-commerce companies. We actually take it really seriously, where front-end and back-end security is critical.
In the conversations that we've been having with the MSMEs over the past 7 years here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, Sonal, the one thing that we understand from them and the one thing that we do hear from MSMEs is that they don't really understand this concept of cloud, etc. They don't understand the need for future technologies like AI. Considering that most of your traditional brick and mortar companies, a lot of them at least, are MSMEs, have you found it maybe difficult? Have you had trouble convincing them to move to the cloud?
The evangelism portion of upfront, the cloud is the right home for e-commerce, used to be a bigger portion of our conversation just 2 or 3 years ago. And now that's starting to change. And I think it's fairly similar in the India market as well. A lot of our customers that we talk to now, they're thinking of the cloud. There's a lot of, I think that initial sort of fear factor of, the cloud is not secure is kind of going away. And now, they're hearing of success. They're hearing of larger brands really leveraging the cloud. So everybody's thinking cloud first as their strategy, even if they're traditional companies. So I guess it's across the board. This is not just an India conversation. I think it's a pretty global one where...
Okay, so I get what you're saying. My question to you is, also to understand what the challenges are, maybe some of the challenges that you faced when it comes to this and how perhaps you've overcome those, how you tackle that.
So cloud computing is an interesting mix. There's 2 large players. I mean, Amazon is far and beyond the largest player in that space. And then you've got Google, doing a great job. You've got Microsoft doing a great job on the sort of office applications or your business applications versus just pure cloud computing similar to AWS. And I think it's, there's a number of, what we see is there's a number of managed hosting companies that are trying to build a cloud computing practice. So there's a lot of shakeout that's happening in that space. And obviously there'll be consolidation, there'll be some companies that'll get it right, but most of them, I think, trying to make that transition from the old-fashioned way of delivering compute, which is traditional managed hosting. Most of them, I believe, will not succeed in making that transition.
We're talking about data security for the industry, but let's talk specifically about the solution that you have when it comes to data security.
And what we do is we have a data platform. So we're a software as a service company, and we learn from everything that we see across our customer base, as in, what are your typical use cases for security? What are the kinds of attacks that are happening? What is the kind of infrastructure that they need and the behavior of the applications? Where traffic is coming from? Where are some of the bad actors? What IP addresses are those bad actors using if they are consistent? So there's your application-aware firewall that we have that's built for e-commerce, really, that sits in front of the site, and it's like a proxy that takes all the traffic. It does things like SSL transformation on the fly. So beyond just the application-aware firewall at the front end, we do things like back-end security. We do things like file integrity management. We try and track changes and snapshots to the back end of the server. Like if any file that we know is problematic changes, or if there's anybody trying to log into the admin server more than a certain number of times.
How's the Indian market looking like for you, Sonal? What expansion plans do you have? Anything that you can share?
Interestingly, more than half our company in terms of headcount is Bangalore. And I expect that to be our fastest growing office as well, because the talent that's available here, the energy levels, just the excitement to do things with the e-commerce companies is very high. So, it's a really exciting market for us. So I guess that sort of gives you some insight into how we expand and how we think about the rest of the world.
While we are talking technology, technology also requires the people who are able to understand that technology and also able to develop that technology. So what hiring plans do you have here in India for 2018 that you can talk about?
It's not have a facility in JP Nagar that can expand 3x of its current size based on the headcount that we bring in. So our investment in India is not just the headcount, it's actually providing services to e-commerce companies in country as well. And based on how we see that response coming, the India office will keep growing anyway, providing global services, but we see that traction in the e-commerce market in India.
Sonal, such a pleasure having you here on the show. Thanks for speaking with us. That's our show tonight. If you have any feedback for us, here's how you get in touch. leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com is our email ID. On social media, tweet at me at Sunanda_J or LOT_ET Now, which is our official Twitter handle. You can also get in touch with us on Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now, which is our Facebook page. Thanks for watching. As always, have yourselves a good night.